talking at this level of I exist, or where that quality of flow or presence is. And then the second question in the contemplation is, what obscures? Covers would be another word, hides, cuts off, whatever your own language is. What obscures my aliveness? What happens when you bring the spiritual into the counseling room? So this is an example of how I bring the spiritual in. I use contemplation. So we started yesterday with how do you bring beauty into your life? They are simple, innocuous questions on the face of it. But if you actually contemplate them, they're not innocuous at all. So they all have an intention. They're informed questions. They're not just sort of pull it out of the blue. And like any other mindfulness practice, they actually want to evoke or provoke a certain quality of response from the person that you're asking to participate in it with you. So contemplating this, what makes me feel alive? The hope is that somewhere the person will remember a moment of, oh, what that felt like. So it might be, I couldn't see who was in the middle of the room, who was getting bombarded with all the balls, but somebody had like 3 or 4 coming at her at once, right? You know, and the giggling and the laughing and the things like that. Like those are like a moment of aliveness that was happening there. So what is it for you in moments of intensity, stress, places where it makes perfectly good logical sense to shut down and back off and not feel and cut off, don't be aware, to distance yourself. So maybe you do that, and then what do you do? What brings you back? What makes you feel alive? So that's the kind of contemplation that we're thinking about. So if you're working with someone who's had trauma, and they have a trauma response that they're caught in what I think is like a trauma loop, in a closed loop system, and they're no longer working from the social brain, which we were talking about the other day. Barbara Fredrickson describes it as an open loop system. In other words, the resonance between one person and another is, it doesn't have an end point. The circle never closes. It's just open. It's resonant, it's reverberating, it's interactive. It has a different system form or structure than a closed circle that goes around and around. It has a definite circumference, it has a definite center. This is an open loop in the sense that it doesn't have a definite center, it doesn't have an end point, it doesn't have a circumference. It can go all the way through the universe. However, it has a point. Some kind of awake quality of awareness that marks me here, that I'm here and I'm holding my awake mind in a particular way, to use John Kabat-Zinn's language. I'm here with intention, commitment, presence. Put lots of words to it. So what happens if you've lost that sense of aliveness? How do you bring yourself back? So if you know how you bring yourself back, then you can begin to do something like step over here and look at the world from another point of view and actually try and be in the shoes of the person that you're talking to, and maybe have some guesses about, some intuitions about how they might come back to feeling alive. So you actually need to know what your own strategies are for this. So we talked about it in lots of different ways. We say, oh well, you know, it's really important to do self-care. So in your handouts, Dan Siegel's Healthy Mind Platter is there. And he talks about the 7 essential elements of what he would think of as a healthy mind. So it's not so far off from what I would call salmon. What's this? And then this. What obscures or covers my aliveness? I talk about it with my clients in terms of essence. How do you lead? And if you talk about it as leaving or exiting, then there's some sense of choice there, some sense of option or possibility, and it's not so much like, oh, you know, that's your ego taking over, bad ego. It's not about that, really. It's just about, that's who I am, and this is the way that I handle life. This is what I do. So it's that same attitude of coming close and being present and directly perceiving what is. So, you know, at this point we're talking about capacity building, like the second stage of the practice. Initially you connect, and then it's okay, now what? What do I do? How am I going to do something that's like a game changer? So as soon as you start to talk about change, there's intention, willingness, commitment, choice, all kinds of other dynamics there. And your clients will fall in lots of different places on any one of those as a continuum. So it could be anywhere in that spectrum. It's not a given that everybody who comes through the door to talk to you is actually going to want to change. They might actually think that you've got a magic bullet, and you can just give them the magic bullet and fix them, and they really won't have to give anything up, let anything go, or they won't have to do what we're doing, which is stop and ask the personal self-reflective questions and figure out what choice they really want to make and what they're genuinely willing to do. And I, over the years, have gotten harder and stronger and clearer about that. We don't go past what the other person is genuinely willing to do. If they're not really genuinely willing to commit or connect, then therapy ends. Because I really don't think that there's much more I can offer at that point. If they'll take away whatever they've learned about senses, connectivity, and use that in their life, then maybe it will seed and generate something where some other possibility comes up. But that's where I would say it's an endpoint in the therapy. So Carl Jung would call that the first stage of therapy, confession. It's just where the person gets to be with another person, tell their story, and feel heard. And that's it. That's what happens. And maybe they talk about the trauma, and maybe they don't. But something happens there that they feel fundamentally respected, recognized as a human being, there's dignity in the connection, and that's enough for right then and right there. And as a therapist, you have to be okay with that wavelength. I think that's really important. You never know what they'll go away and do with that. You have no way of knowing. You have somebody come and say, well, you know, do you remember, Margaret, when you said Robert, you know, you're like talking about 30 years ago? No, I don't remember. I'm lucky if I remember 10, right? So no, I don't remember, but they do. And what they remember is the connection. It's completely about that. It's completely about feeling like they're heard, respected, loved, cared for, all the time. So, what obscures? I sometimes talk about the obscuration as cocoon. It's like, how do you cocoon? How do you wrap yourself up? How do you protect yourself? And there's lots of fun things you can do at a body movement level to imitate, or, you know, in a group situation with kids, and with adults too, you know. Like, just to think for a moment, how do you obscure your aliveness physically? What does that mean? So this morning I was taking my own advice in meditation. I was feeling like, okay, I'll sit, and Brian was giving this instruction about, you know, supporting your spine, and I'm always wanting to move. I don't actually want to stay in one spot with my spine in a particular way. And so, okay, explore that, Margaret. You know, be brave, whatever. That's how I talk to myself. And then I just let myself collapse. And so this is actually part of the training, is you find the posture, you sit in it, then you let yourself fall apart, then you come back, and you try and find your posture again, and you let yourself fall apart, and you come back. So what you learn in that is how you collapse or fall apart at the physical level. And you just sit in the collapse for a couple of minutes, use the sensing that we've been talking about, and just feel what is. So what I got this morning was, oh, now I know why people talk about turtling. You ever heard someone say, well, that person's a turtle? No? Well, I have. You have, right? And it's that sense that they have some way of pulling back into their shell and covering up that isn't necessarily as obvious as like the head and the legs and everything comes in and all that's left is the shell. They're still there, but they're pulled back. So I just played with being a turtle without moving. What does that mean to turtle? To hide, to pull in, to withdraw, to pull back, to disconnect, without letting anybody see what you're doing. We all have some of those strategies where we silently, non-verbally, implicitly have a way to lead without telling that we're going. Sometimes without telling ourselves, but definitely without telling other people. So think of all the times you've been at a party or a social situation where someone is like really bending your ear, really like that, and it's boring. It's really boring. And you know, you're a nice person, and I don't know, maybe it's a professional situation, and you know, you've got your reputation to think about. And once you be a good networker, shouldn't one? So you do whatever you do in those situations, right? And usually we have some way to smile, and sort of stay, but not really. Part of us is gone. So when I ask about what your exit is, or how you obscure, I don't actually mean going out the door, but that could be what you do, is you actually leave and go out the door. That used to be my best strategy for how to end a fight. Just walk out the door, but it's a good interruption. Had some wisdom.
Go to the bathroom.
Go to the bathroom. So I actually got trained to do that. Go to the bathroom in therapy group. So my teacher, who, bless her, she's no longer here, but I really dearly love her. She taught me immense amount. Ellen Palm, local from Vancouver, some of you may know her. Anyway, I'm learning how to run a high energy, intense groups with her. And she'd have two people in the middle of the room, they'd be having a dialogue, and everybody would be listening, we'd be fully engaged, and I'd be like, oh, what's she going to do here? And she said, excuse me for a moment here to the person. I'll be right back. And she'd get up and she'd leave and go to the bathroom. So I asked after seeing this a number of times, what's going on? Why are you doing this? She said, well, sometimes you just need to interrupt the energy. You don't really want to be rude. So I just take it on myself and I interrupt and I leave. And then while I'm in there, I figure out what I'm going to do next. and then I come back. And she said, okay, thank you. Appreciate your patience. And thank you. Appreciate your patience. And she would go deeper to another level. So I got to know, okay, the bathroom thing, that means when she comes back, it's going to get real. It's going to go to a deeper level. It's going to be more work with what I'm calling direct perception. How to be present without manipulating, without trying to take away from or massage or add to what's actually going on. So in the Buddhist tradition, that's called neither accepting nor rejecting. And in therapy, I learned to call it not feeding it or fighting it. Actually just being with what it is. And feeding and fighting seemed to be a metaphor that most people could get. You know when you're starting your anger, right? You say those 3 more things to yourself that will just sort of put you over the top, and you're going to say what you know you shouldn't say. Or you say them to yourself anyway, and then you say what you shouldn't say. So, obscuration. One way to say this is, what interrupts the flow? What interrupts my flow? What takes me out of flow.